I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 88. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Good morning, everyone. Well, at least it's morning here. And if you're listening to this in real time when it drops, it's morning for you. But any other time, good day to you. Today's a very exciting day because today we are driving up to the mountains. We have a client flying in and they have a pretty sweet Airbnb they've rented in the mountains, and they're bringing their team with them. So there's 5 total of them. And Kristen and I have our own arrangements for lodging, but we're going to show up to their Airbnb and for 2 full days facilitate in this beautiful, great room that has windows with a view is what the pictures look like anyway. So it's going to be dreamy. And yeah, so we're pumped about that. We're prepped and ready to go. Everything is set. You know, there's a lot of work that goes into these, but it's enjoyable work, you know, getting the workbooks together and tailoring content and planning out the agenda and the flow of the day and really knowing what the client wants. And it all comes together in these 2 days for the team in a really beautiful way, but that does not happen without prep, right? And so we work hard on the back end to prep everything and make sure it goes smoothly. And so now is our chance to go in and do our thing and really help this firm get clear and hit the ground running for Q2 and beyond. So that is what we're looking forward to today. I am sharing with you on the podcast today the next category. Actually, there's 2 categories of lessons. So last week we talked about lessons learned from the March sprinters that were much more internally focused about, you know, how the owners are thinking, what they're believing, their perspective, feelings were involved in all of that. And so that was really the lessons from last week. And then now moving forward, they're a little more external. It still has a lot to do with the way the owner is thinking and their perspective and what they're believing, but it's not what the lesson is stated as about. So now today, the categories that we're going to touch on is tracking and numbers, and then also planning and calendaring. Those are the next categories of lessons. And then next week, we will be talking about execution or implementation of the plans that have been set into place and how they deal with that and what they're learning, how to be really stay focused, but also agile when needed. So we'll talk about that next week. Okay, so let's start with today, the numbers, because there's fewer of the tracking lessons listed than the planning and calendaring lessons, but they are there. And the reason I want to share them with you so that you see the difference it makes for an owner when they actually dig into their numbers. So there's 5, and then we're going to move on to calendaring and planning. The first one is knowing your numbers creates clarity, creates calm, and provides a call to action. I like this because this sounds like something I would say, but it's different coming from someone who is actually taking the advice and running with it in terms of, hey, get clear on your numbers. Like, you know, I did an episode a few weeks ago. It was March 2nd. It's episode 82, Tracking Metrics, What's Your Next Level? I highly recommend that. It's a good spot to go, even if you feel like you're really good at tracking. There's some things to think about that I give you there. And so some of what the lessons learned this March, they stemmed from that episode for sprint participants, but I wanted to share them here because they shared the lessons in the sprint. So that was the first one. Knowing your numbers creates clarity, creates calm, and provides a call to action. Now, there's another lesson from a participant. Knowing your numbers creates confidence. And I loved that because that's true. It's almost like, you know, even if you're pretty sure things are good and you're pretty sure like this in my business does better than that in my business, this margin's too high, but you don't know what the numbers are. You just have a hunch or a sense for things. That's not a good way to run a business. So the more that you dig in and the more you understand about your business, you do have more confidence. It's a lot easier to make decisions, to make calls, to, stand tall because you have an awareness of the inner workings of your business that you didn't before have. It's a very different feeling. So knowing your numbers creates confidence. The next one, knowing my numbers gets me excited about growing my business. Yes, I see this all the time. And it's true for me too. Every business owner, it's the same for every business owner, but I just happen to work with law firm owners. The more I dig into my numbers, the more I want to dig into my numbers. This I put in here because I do find that this is true once someone starts getting curious about different, like looking at things from different angles from a numbers perspective, it creates more curiosity and you want to dig in further and you have ideas on like, oh, I wonder how this thing is doing. Like we measured how this is doing. How is this thing doing? And how do we measure that? Let's dig in and look and figure it out. It's a beautiful cycle of knowledge. Once you start digging in, you want to dig in more and more. The numbers don't lie. And I need to get better at tracking because that's the only way to know where I'm actually at. I can lie to myself, but the numbers don't lie. This one I wanted to share because this was a realization that a pretty well-established firm owner has. I mean, he has a team and he's doing really well. And he is just coming around to this that, okay, I need to get better at tracking because it's the only way that I can actually know where I'm at. I might feel like I'm at a certain place, but I don't know unless I know the numbers. So I can lie to myself, and lie might seem harsh to some of you listening, but truthfully, if you aren't telling yourself the truth, if you aren't telling yourself the truth, then maybe it's not a deliberate lie. It's not an intentional lie, but it's a lie. You're not going off of the truth. So that's what he's meaning by this. I can lie to myself, but the numbers don't lie. Meaning I can maybe avoid the truth, but the numbers are the truth. We call clients tracking portals, or internally we call it the source of truth. Because it is. I can have a conversation with an attorney all day long about their business and feel like I have a good grasp. And then I go look at their numbers and it tells a different story. So I have to really take both into account when I'm learning about a firm, because someone's perspective about what's going on is really helpful. But the numbers, I can't do my job without the numbers because that really is the source of truth. So those are the lessons from the sprinters about tracking and that they deposited into the tracker this month. And I wanted to share those with you. Hopefully it provides some inspiration for you to dig in and really get to know your business, understand your business so that you are running off of truth and not just hunches, running off of facts, not feelings. One of the participants, by the way, her dashboard that she created, a spreadsheet, is titled Facts, Not Feelings, which I loved. So good. All right, let's move on to calendaring and planning. Lessons that came, that stemmed from, or that had to do with calendaring and planning. Okay, the first one. I need to think of my calendar not as time management, but as energy management. I love this. I thought that was a really beautiful takeaway. And there was a second lesson that was very close. My energy fluctuates throughout the day, but it also fluctuates throughout the week. I need to pay attention to that and plan around it. Manage energy throughout the week, not just throughout the day. And I thought this was brilliant. I've never used these words, but I have thought about my week that way. Like I know at the end of the week, I have given it all. And so I try to make Fridays lighter for myself. And I'm sure many of you may think of it the same way, but I want you to really wake up to what you're doing there is recognizing your energy and honoring your energy levels. That's one way you can do that. But how could you really evaluate your energy throughout the week and then plan accordingly? And it may not, depending on where you are with your firm, it may not mean that you get to flip everything on its head, but you can make adjustments to honor your energy once you've evaluated it. And I think that's a really great way to think about this. So yeah, I need to think of my calendar not as time management, but energy management. Really kind of sums this up, whether it's your day or your week. Okay. It's okay for my plan to get derailed as long as I have a plan for when it gets derailed. This is good because, we talk a lot about you have to take a breath when things do get derailed. And I'm just going to use your week as an example, or your day, right, with calendaring. When things don't go as planned and something urgent has popped up or something unanticipated has popped up that you actually have to deal with, when that happens, you need to have a plan for when those times occur. So when those happen, how are you going to make sure that you get back on track? What most people do is when those things happen and when the plan gets derailed, they just roll with it. And they just fly by the seat of their pants, and then they just keep hitting, try to keep fixing things and hustling and it's like trying to catch up. And they're stressed out. And so that may last for the rest of the day. That may run into the whole week because one day got thrown off. And when the people who manage this really well, and part of mastering your calendar and mastering the plan you have for yourself as you move through time is to stay in control. Meaning when something happens outside of your control that you didn't anticipate, and now you're going to deal with that, you're choosing consciously to deal with that thing, then I also always encourage people to consciously also choose what, after that they're done dealing with that event, don't just keep slamming into your week. Take stock, look at your calendar, make some adjustments and rearrange some things, and then get back to honoring your plan. But what most people don't do is they don't stop to actually reconfigure the plan that they had for their week. They just try to catch up and hustle. And it's almost like they're frantic and a little neurotic as they try to just slam through the rest of their week and get everything done. But then again, what's going to happen is you're going to land at Friday and you're going to be a shell of yourself that it's at the cost of you. And that doesn't get to happen. You have to consciously stay in control. If you decide to work long hours, that's okay, but it's because you consciously made the decision. You don't want to allow things to happen to you. You want to stay in control of what you are deciding to do. And if you're going to decide to, like I said, it's not that you have to I'm not saying you don't get to work past your set work hours, even when things get thrown off. You could set that up for yourself. Many people do, and that's great. But it doesn't matter what you decide as long as you're deciding it consciously. And eventually, if you're treating yourself pretty poorly, meaning, you do reconfigure the plan, and that plan means you're really spending a lot of hours working beyond what you wanted to, but you're consciously making that choice. Okay. But you keep doing that enough. It's almost like feeding yourself a shit sandwich. At some point, you're going to stop feeding yourself a shit sandwich, right? That sounds really harsh, but that's the truth. This also makes me think about the lesson that I shared last week, the very last lesson. I am the problem and the solution. This is one of those scenarios. If you keep making plans and honoring plans that are at the cost of you, okay, you are the problem because you're making those plans. If you make a plan that is not at the cost of you and eliminates distractions and gets things done as efficiently as possible and ruthlessly delegates, and then you're the solution, right? Then that's when you stop feeding yourself a shit sandwich. So I know that seems harsh and I think it's a little funny, but hopefully that gets the point driven home. And so when this person is saying it's okay for my plan to get derailed as long as I have a plan for when it does get derailed, that is key. If you don't have a go-to way of dealing with your calendar when it does get derailed, then you're going to probably end up in a situation where you are at the effect of the world and you are just chasing some sense of completion or success for that week. That has got to stop, and only you can stop it. And I can hear many of you now saying, well, you don't understand my situation. I'm so busy. You don't understand X, Y, and Z, or it doesn't matter. You get to choose. And if you tell yourself something different, you are lying to yourself. So really make sure you understand that you are the problem and you are the solution, and that it's important to have a plan for when things don't go as you planned. What are you going to do in order to reconfigure the plan? How are you going to take a breath and stay conscious and stay in control of what you decide to maneuver through for the rest of the week or the day? And the other question from last week that I'm going to ask you again is if you don't have this for yourself, if you don't have oh, my plan got derailed, so I'm going to take 5 minutes, look at my calendar, and rearrange it. That's what I do when the plan gets derailed. If you don't have a go-to thing like that, then going back to the question that comes from, Jerry Colonna, which is, how are you complicit in creating the conditions you say you don't want? It fits right in here. So, okay, next one. Having a hard stop to have to go do something different is useful because I get a brain break and I should schedule more of them. I totally agree with this. This is almost like putting constraints on your time. If you've got an appointment with someone else or to do something that's totally different than work, it can feel unproductive, but it can be the thing that actually lets you put your foot on the gas, right? It gives your brain a little space to breathe. You enjoy yourself for a bit, and then you can, when it's time to get back to work, you're fresh. So you don't have to I think sometimes we think we need a full week or a weekend in order to get fresh again, but these small breaks go a long way. So I highly encourage them, and that's what this participant was talking about. The longer I work, the less productive I am. So setting a hard cutoff time is important. That is true. That's true for most humans, maybe all humans. This person was just realizing it and started setting hard cutoff times. I mean, he did this towards the beginning of March, and he was doing a really good job with it. There were nights he chose to work later. That was part of his plan, and he was honoring the plan. But there were many days he cut off early, and he hadn't been doing that really. He let it bleed into the evening, and he stopped doing that, and he was getting just as much or more done because of how productive he was staying. He was becoming less effective and productive the longer he worked. My ability to fully engage with work is directly related to my ability to fully disengage when I'm not working. This is a good one because, even when we think about the weekends and we disengage, but we're still checking email, and we kind of had these things in the back of our mind that if we can, we're going to get to, that all takes a toll. If you decide to fully disengage when you're not working, it allows you to fully engage when you are working. So, that's something to keep in mind with your time off and your personal time and your leisure time, is to fully disengage. It felt better to schedule less and get it all done than schedule a lot and fall short. This is a lesson around being realistic with your time. And most people, the reason they have such a problem with calendar and planning, especially when they start doing Monday Map, which is what I teach, they plan out their week and it's unrealistic. And they've cut corners. They haven't given enough time for certain activities on their calendar. They've double booked themselves. Even if it doesn't look like they've double booked themselves, it's still sneaky because they have something on there that they gave themselves 45 minutes for. And then the next thing they've given another 45 minutes for. Really, that first thing needed an hour and 15 and the next thing needed an hour. So you're behind already, right? So it is double booking yourself, even though it doesn't look like it. It's easy to lie to yourself when you cut corners with the events that go on your calendar. But once you start being very honest about how long you need to actually be productive, it feels so good at the end of the week because it looks like less may be scheduled on your calendar. And so at first it can be a little stressful, but the truth is you can get it all done. You get to Friday and you have it all done, and that feels amazing, versus packing things in and making it look more productive on the calendar, but setting yourself up for failure. So then you get to the end of the week, you've fallen short and it feels crappy. Having clear rocks helps me set my direction. Yes. That's why I do quarterly retreats. That's why in Mastery Group now we facilitate quarterly planning, because if you know your rocks, then you know the direction you need to go. Then it helps you plan your priorities and how you're going to spend your time very wisely. So yes. When I'm consistently busy, it's a sign that I've been lazy in my planning. I like this because the truth is that's where we feel like we're a chicken running around with its head cut off. That's because there isn't intention and there hasn't been a really good plan set in place. So when you do feel constantly busy and not truly productive, it means that your plan probably didn't provide what you wanted it to provide. And so go back, lay things out again, and in a way where you're actually getting important work done. You're moving the needle. I work better when I do hard things first, whether that's in my day or my week. Schedule accordingly. Yes. I have found this for myself. I don't preach this because I know everybody has different energy levels at different times of the day. But for me, I agree. If you just get the hard thing or the thing that you're dreading or the thing, whatever, the heaviest thing out of the way first, the day is just a win. And of course you do more after that, but it gives you momentum, keeps your spirits up throughout the day. And also you just knocked something amazing out of the park right off the bat. If I want to have the most meaningful impact on my firm, I need to be ruthless about delegating. This is true. Hanging on to things when you really shouldn't be hanging on to them is selfish and it keeps everything small. You're playing small, your firm plays smaller than it can. So I love this. When if I want to have the most meaningful impact of my firm, I need to be ruthless about delegating. Yes, 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 yes. Here's a short and sweet one, but really true. I'm the boss of my calendar. Yes. People oftentimes get it backwards where they look at their calendar, even if they've planned it all, and they feel like a slave to their calendar. And it isn't that way. You consciously made this decision, and there's reasons why you set it up the way you set it up. Honor that plan because the feeling at the other end of that is freaking amazing. And not just the feeling. I mean, that's a really juicy part of it is how good it feels, but also the needle gets moved for your firm. Otherwise, when you're at the, if you ignore your calendar or you have this feeling about your calendar where you don't feel in control, that's just a perspective shift. So this person was saying, I'm the boss of my calendar. And that was different for her versus feeling like the calendar is the boss of me. And whatever is useful for you, right? Whichever perspective is more useful for you to actually honor your plan, that's what matters. But for this person actually making the switch to, instead of thinking that the calendar was the boss of her, she's the boss of her calendar. And that made a big difference. Be specific in breaking down work to adequately account for time and to avoid rethinking. The reason I put this in here is the avoid rethinking part. If you break down your projects into tasks so that you can see clearly, like this is next, 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 and next to each task, I mean, you know about how much time you need for each task, and you schedule accordingly, then it allows you to adequately account for time, and you don't have to rethink. What do I need to do next? What do I need to do next? What do I need to do next? Your brain, when you are in your week, that is the time for put your head down and honor your plan. If you have to lift your head and find your bearings and think about something that's on your calendar, it's like, where do I start with that? Then you didn't break it down enough. So, last I shared a lesson from January sprint lessons that you can't think and hit at the same time, which was baseball. It came from the world of baseball, but it's the same thing with execution. You can't think and execute at the same time. You have to think and then you can execute. You have to figure out what you're going to do to execute and then you execute. And it's the same thing with planning your week. So being specific and breaking down the work enough will help avoid this rethinking time. It's just wasting time because you already thought through this stuff. So break it down enough in your calendar so that you can just hit. You don't have to think and then hit. Adding the fine-tuning elements to a separate list will ensure I keep my project moving forward. And this is about, there's many of you, and I identify with this, that you care about excellence and the details and dare I say perfection, right? But there is a difference between, that quote, done is better than perfect. that's true, but how do you actually, if you're someone who cares about the fine details, how do you do that without feeling stressed? Well, that's what this person was saying. If I I make a list of the things that can fine tune it and perfect it, so to speak, or just reach this level of excellence, it's on a separate list. So my first job is just to get it done so that I can keep things moving forward. And then I can go back and schedule time to tweak and refine. And the final lesson of today's episode is simple, but it's truth. And this lesson, I think, is just so representative of how your life will change when you start getting good at planning and honoring your plan. And specifically, I'm talking about calendaring right now and looking ahead at your week. So planning your days and planning your week ahead of time and honoring that plan. It's never going to go perfectly. That's not the point. But when you make that plan, this last lesson, it is the truth and it will change your life. Okay, so here it is. It feels really good to go into Monday knowing what's on tap. Amen. Have you done that? Some of you listening to this don't. Some of you know, well, yeah, I have, a couple big things coming up this week. That's what's on tap. No, it's a different feeling to hit your week and know you go into Monday and you know what you've got scheduled for the week. It's all going to be taken care of. Your job is to honor your plan. And you have a schedule that you can follow that keeps you on track that you created. It's a really great feeling. And it takes away the hustle, that sense of hustle. It allows you to relax as you execute instead of feeling all tightly wound as you execute because you just are things falling through the cracks? I don't know what's coming up. You're surprised by things that if you really did a good Monday map, all that would be, you'd know exactly what's coming up. It really is the difference between slamming into your week and being very prepared for your week, consciously walking into your week. I have a friend that talks about on Sunday, he has the Sunday scaries about work and all the things on his plate. He works for a big corporation. And, we talk about the Sunday scaries, but my clients don't have the Sunday scaries when they make a really good plan for their week and a really well thought out plan. And this also reminded me, a few weeks ago, my Friday wrap lesson was being prepared is good for your sanity. Being prepared is good for your mental health. Being prepared is a way to control the outcome. For me that week, I wasn't as prepared as I normally am. And God, it was so stressful. I normally don't live that way. And so even getting a taste of it, it's good for me to have that every once in a while because it reminds me of what's important, first of all, but it also reminds me of what many, 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 many of you out there feel like on a regular basis. When you aren't prepared, it takes a toll on you. And it may be what you're used to, but it doesn't mean it doesn't take a toll on you. And so walking into Monday, knowing exactly what's on tap, that is a sense of calm and confidence that you don't have unless you've prepared. And that's what Monday Map is. It's really preparing for your week in a very smart way. Okay, that's what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be here next Tuesday with the final batch of lessons from the March participants for you to take and do something with in your own life, in your own world. Hey there. If you enjoyed this podcast, I highly recommend you come and check out Mastery Group. It is where owner attorneys come together to study this material, apply it, and thus create really big results for their firm and for their life. So come on over, velocitywork.com/join to get more information and get started. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.